Phil, thanks for being here.
Sure, you bet. It's good to be here.
Last time we were together was in Austin, Texas.
Yeah.
Which is where IBM's design HQ is, that you oversee. You oversee some 1,600 designers in 20 countries down there. You're showing the boots. Everybody note the boots. We had a whole conversation backstage about the boots. I'd kind of like to just talk about boots, but we're going to stay on point here. So an interesting factoid, though. You run this giant design operation, but you weren't trained as a designer. You spent a lot of your career as a software entrepreneur. I'm not sure exactly what the analogy is. Maybe it's like somebody running a fine dining empire who was never trained to cook, but they love to eat.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Like Ratatouille.
Yeah, maybe. So explain to us quickly, how you came to find yourself in this unique role and running such a, important, huge design operation at a big company, global company like IBM.
Sure. Well, it was a long route, but I think at the beginning was kind of the aha moment, and for me, what design means to business. And that was in my first startup. We had developed some distributed object technology. We were making it into a document management system at the time in the late 1980s. I felt like the world was changing, and the nature of work was changing pretty fundamentally. So we started working with lawyers who were the owners of all documents at the time. This is kind of a boring story, but that's what happened. And it turns out that what I realized was I had to sell software. I had a startup. I'd started myself. Back then, I didn't know anything about venture capital, so it was just me. I had to make money. And so I had to get people to buy my stuff. And in order to buy my stuff, I had to be better than the alternative way of get that job done. And the way that job was getting done was assistants were typing things. And if you would have asked an attorney at the time how to get faster document production, they would have said, give me a faster assistant. Mm-hmm. I felt like things were going to change. And so we had to develop software that was so good, we didn't use this word at the time, but that the experience was so great that it was worth getting ridiculed at work for having a box on your desk and typing yourself in order to get better outcomes on the other side of the printer. That was me sweating those details, and it was during that period of time that I stumbled into people that were formally trained designers that were working in the early days of digital design. And as I told you in Austin, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my, I've been up till I didn't know how to scale that capability. And so from that moment on, design has been a way to scale the probability of excellent outcomes.
And that's really, that's how business and design fuse together, right? And that's part of our whole conversation we're having here. So fast forward to 2011, I think it was, IBM bought your... 2010, bought your company. You ended up at IBM, and Ginni Rometty becomes CEO, and IBM wants to re-embrace design. Clay talked yesterday a bit about IBM's design legacy, obviously under Thomas Watson Jr., kind of creating the template for modern corporate business design. But why was this the right moment for IBM to have sort of a new design transformation? The company's moving forward in the cognitive business, Watson and new technology. Why did you need this overhaul of design?
Well, at the time, we were like a lot of companies still are. We had projects that were taking too long for the modern world. We had outcomes that were missing the mark in the marketplace too often. And if we didn't have a no culture, we had a culture that was certainly resistant to change. And if you combine those three things, right, how do you make teams more effective and more efficient? How do you increase the probability that the outcomes in the marketplace will be more spot on correct? And how do you change how a culture engages, the actual teaming and collaboration that happens? In my opinion, there is a single lever to do that, and that's the lever of the design process. And adding formally trained designers into the teams. So that was the basis for it. There was actually a period of time before Ginni became CEO. There was about an 18-month period of time after my company was acquired that I was asked to, whatever you did there, we want more of that. Because our acquisition was kind of interesting. We didn't bring any accretive technology to IBM. We just delivered a product experience that was superior, and we were winning our market. And so when we were bought, it was very much with an eye toward, I think a lot of the people that bought us didn't necessarily know it was design or design thinking that were some of the underpinning principles. But whatever it was we did, they wanted.
So speaking of your principles, we have a couple of images here that illustrate the design methodology that you're using at IBM. So let's pull those up. Well, let's look at the first one here, and you can explain. We can see we have a yellow dot, a focus on user outcomes. We have the infinity, restless reinvention, and 3 green dots, diverse, empowered teams. Explain what's the philosophy behind this cool, simple design here that we see.
So it's interesting, you know, yesterday there was a whole debate about design thinking, and maybe we'll touch on that. I don't think design thinking is about workshops. I don't think it's about Post-it notes. People get hung up on the process. To me, this is the basis for design thinking. We don't call it a method. We don't call it a process. We have teams that practice design thinking that do very different in-the-loop processes to get to the outcome. But I think there are 3 things that design and design thinking focuses us on. And the first one is to center everybody on the user. It's not the available technology. It's not what I want to say. It's what does the user need. It helps us prioritize. It gives us a moral center to our agile processes underneath. This notion of everything as a prototype, you know, this is how you change culture, is to start, you have to get out of that resistant mindset. You have to get, you know, and again, there's lots of words on this, and we shouldn't be debating what title we put on this framework. But this notion of constant iteration, everything is a prototype. Even when I ship something, that's a prototype. When I live my day-to-day, that's a prototype, and I can learn and I can get better tomorrow. That's the loop. And finally, we think it is important, and this is the most interesting aspect of this conversation about design thinking, we actually believe that diverse, empowered teams are important. We think inclusion is important. And we don't think inclusion is something we should design for. We think inclusion is something we should bake in. And so this notion of diversity cuts across every possible dimension, and we are more intentionally forming teams that are diverse in every dimension than ever before. Yes, gender, yes, race, yes, culture, yes, geography, all of those things. And the combination of these, if we get whole teams to embrace this simple framework, we see demonstrably better outcomes.
And we go to this next image, and you've pollinated the egg of design there.
We have. This is our infamous loop. There was a documentary made about the program that's called The Loop, and essentially this forms the basis for the mental model that we like to instantiate. You know, one of the things that we found in bringing design thinking into the especially existing teams is all of the, and it gets kind of silly sometimes, but it's important when you're trying to do culture change. Even the depiction of most design thinking frameworks or processes looks like a waterfall process.
Yeah.
And we have to empathize. We have to understand. I know right here we have to prototype. And it's kind of interesting, it works both ways. Both when you put that on top of an engineering team that's in process and is under pressure to deliver continuously, they start going, wait a minute, I've been in that waterfall world, I can't stop to understand. It's interesting the fixed mindset of too many designers today, where they also say, you have to stop. You don't even understand your user. And it's kind of like, we need to get this thing where we build, yesterday I think it was Morrow talking about trust. We have a saying that says empathy first with ourselves and then with our users. We have to build this whole team relationship that starts working together based on those previous principles, and we'll go through the loop. And so underneath this loop, I don't think it animates on this, but we have this notion of observe, reflect, make, and we think that is if there is a process to our design thinking approach, it is simply that. It's that we observe real people in the world and engage with real users of our products and services. We reflect on that. We then make something. We reflect on that. We observe it in use. We reflect on that. And we try to get our teams to go through the loop as many times and as fast as possible. And it was interesting for us, it may not be this way everywhere, but for us, when we simply changed the visualization and our language around it, it changed everything in terms of our team's ability to consume it.
So let's talk about, you hit the ground running when you got this mission. You started hiring people. You didn't know you could hire people as fast as you ended up hiring them and training them and integrating them into teams. And you found that it feeds on itself, that you get people out there, you know, who've gone through the design training, and then they get people excited about it and people want to be a part of it. And so you created this, which Tony referenced, this badging program, and I think the figure we had in the script was 90,000 people, but the latest figure I saw just like a day or so ago was 110,000 people.
Yep.
It's going, and of course IBM has 380,000, so you have a lot of people to train. But just quickly tell us, like, how did this digital badging, digital is the first step, but it's a 3-tier system. How did that come about, and how did that go viral the way it has in the company?
Well, it's interesting. So I'm a big believer that you don't train people on design thinking. It was mentioned yesterday. You do it by doing. It is a doing thing. That is what it is. A lot of it's common sense. A lot of what we talk about is common sense. But you put a framework, you put a language around it so that it can scale out. We started this by literally touching, like being very invasive with our teams. We didn't just generically go out and say, okay, everybody become a design thinker. We actually only let people into the program based on the teams. It's always been project-based. After we had got, I don't know, a couple of hundred teams, there were about 15,000 people that we were literally working, my core team was literally involved in those projects every day. It was very hands-on. We never taught design thinking, we simply used design thinking to help them get better outcomes. And then we came up with this notion of digital badging to recognize the people that had gone through the program, because we started seeing in a company our size, people move teams. And so we wanted some way to identify when people who had been involved in this way of creating moved to a new team. Wow, that was all of a sudden, we didn't have to touch anymore. Those people were taking these methods to the new team. Mm-hmm. So we wanted a way to recognize their skill set, and then we wanted a scalable way where they could onboard people into their team with zero touch from my central team. Mm-hmm. And that's how the digital thing came about. So we are announcing today a digital platform we'll talk about in a minute, but that platform it's not meant for you to make a remit of, okay, my 300 people, go learn design thinking. It's meant to be used in the context of a project that is actually going to ship. And that's how we've always approached it. Why did it go from 90 to 110? Because I will tell you, this is catching on. Like, I mean, we tried to count the teams about a year and a half ago, the number of teams, which is the more interesting metric to me, the number of teams executing using these practices and principles and delivering things. About a year ago, it crossed 1,000, and we think today it's somewhere around 2,500 teams. So people are now changing teams, working on new projects. They're taking these practices. They're saying, hey, 10 teammates, go take this digital online onboarding so that you even know what I'm talking about when I talk about my users and when I talk about hills and playbacks and what have you. So, yeah.
You know, I think that you're not trying to turn 110,000 or 380,000 people into designers, but you're trying to have everyone in the company appreciate this more cohesive way of working with customers, right? And,
absolutely.
And be able to work with the designers in their midst. So it's a way of kind of getting everybody grounded in this process, right?
Yeah. Look, it's really interesting to me to talk to designers that diss design thinking. First of all, a lot of these designers think they're the makers. Let me tell you, it's the coder that's the maker. The prototype is not the made thing. It's the thing that ships to the customer that is the made thing. And so, do you want to be a maker world? Well, I think we all want to be in a maker's world. I think that's part of what we think the design function is. We have to incorporate the makers into our process. And by the way, we have to become part of their process. And so, yeah, it's a way to get more design into things, because, as you said, we're also hiring formally trained designers. You can't take away the requirement of craft out of that equation. But those craftspeople need to be part of the team that is delivering the made outcome.
Remember that data point for the next panel, but I want to get to your news. That's a great tee-up thing. I'm going to queue up this next image that we have here, which goes with this exciting news that you're going to announce right here on the stage. We love to make news at our conferences, and Phil's going to do it for us. So you have a new design thinking service.
We do.
And here it is.
Yeah.
Tell us what this is, Enterprise Design Thinking by IBM.
That's a pretty creative name, isn't it? I don't. You can call this.
Did you prototype and you know?
You can call this.
Did you put stickies on a
Bluebird.
board?
You can call this Yo Mama if you want. You can call this whatever you want to call this. Let's not get into debate about the title of what it is. We call it enterprise design thinking. It works for us. But we are announcing this today. It's a platform that's now available. It's a digital learning. You can get badges. There's 3 badges that are available as a part of the service. The all digital badges are a beginning badge that if you're entering a project, you can quickly in about 4 hours, and it actually helps you work on the project. So you actually do things as a part of taking the course. It's not just listening and learning. We're trying to get you here as much or more than here. So it is now available, ibm.com/design/thinking. If you are interested in trying to get to better outcomes, we're also releasing with it a new report from Forrester that's just being released today, which has been documenting over the last 6 months the results of using our particular approach to this thing that we call enterprise design thinking. The results are crazy. We now have the world now has a specific framework, a quantifiable framework of how we can start to articulate the value of design and design thinking in an enterprise. And I will tell you that teams are delivering twice as fast. The ROI of this is over 300% on a net present value basis over just 3 years. It's a massive ROI because the products are hitting the market. And that third thing that Harry talked about yesterday, employee engagement is off the hook. In fact, as a part of this total economic impact study, we found that some 19% of the total value comes from the increased engagement and the increased collaboration of employees in your company. So those 3 things, more efficient deliverables and faster deliverables. The deliverables hit the mark in the marketplace better, and employees are happier and more engaged as a result.
Well, you're going to be sharing all this work that you've been doing with your clients and partners, and thanks for coming here to announce it to everybody and being with us today.
You bet. Thanks a lot.
Great conversation, Phil.
Thank you.
Thanks.